What if movement is not just about fitness, but serves the equally important need of making your life easier, calmer, and more functional, especially if your brain is wired differently? Today, we are talking about movement as medicine for neurodivergent adults, what neurodivergence actually means, why it can change one's relationship with pain, and sometimes become overwhelming. In this and the simplest ways to start improving comfort and capacity in those situations. Our guest is Paula James. Paula is a movement specialist who helps people, both neurodivergent and otherwise, become more comfortable in their bodies, more capable in daily life. And she also works with a neurodivergent informed lens. So she has lived the journey from chronic pain to practical, real life strategies that actually hold up. So, Paula, question for you first here. When you work with neurodivergent adults, what is the one problem or the core problem, not the one problem, the core problem you are really resolving beyond flexibility or strength?
I think the core problem is so many of them have been told so often to try harder at things that just don't work for them. And so then they start to think that it's their fault and they begin to assume that a tremendous amount of effort is required in many, many areas of their lives. So I help people stop blaming themselves and teach them how to support and how to work effectively with the body and the brain that they actually have.
Beautiful. So we're gonna peel back that onion and go into some of the other areas in depth. But right now, I want to remind our audience you're watching WellWave Now, and this is where timeless wisdom, like you just heard, lights your wellness path.
So welcome to
Yeah.
the program, Paula. It's great to have you on.
Thank you, Rick. Good to be here.
Yeah, it's excellent. We're looking forward to this topic. And before we jump into solutions, we need to first clarify when people hear neurodivergent, they assume that it might be a diagnosis or a label. But what does it mean first? Let's get into the explanation of it for day-to-day life. So my question to you is in plain language, Paula, help our listeners understand what neurodivergent is, what that means, and just an overview of it for us.
So, neurodivergent means that there are structural and functional differences in the brain compared to what we might call a neurotypical brain. I'll unpack that in just a moment. What it does not mean is that someone with those structural differences can become like everyone else by trying harder. And it's also not a character flaw. So here's one set of possibilities. So structural differences, right? So the amygdala down at the base of the brain, in some people, that area of the brain, that area is involved in threat detection, right? Is this a safe place? Am I safe here? And in some people, that area of the brain is larger and more active than other people. Those folks are going to have a higher stress hormone profile on a regular basis because more brain cells are actively scanning the environment for danger. There are also people who have an area of the brain that processes internal signals. Where am I in the world? Where are my parts in relation to each other? Am I hungry? Am I thirsty? It helps with coordination. And in some folks, that area of the brain is smaller and less active than it is in other people. And so these are folks who maybe feel that they can trip over their own feet walking across an empty room, right? And if you have both of those together, you might have the piece of perceive the environment to be dangerous, and I don't feel confident in my ability to block something coming at me or to get out of here. So the world is a more dangerous place than someone else might perceive it, and my ability to respond to that danger is less. There are also folks who have a part of the brain that processes emotions that is larger and more active. So emotional experiences will be bigger for them. This is the best day of my life, or it is terrible what just happened. If they're aware that their brain is, more of their brain cells are interested in emotions, they might be able to let the emotions roll through and not assign too much meaning to them, not let themselves get wrapped up in them.
Okay, policy. You're another Dr. Bob. Yeah, we
Okay.
always have to stop Dr. Bob on this stuff too, because you just want to go right into, how do I address this? What can we do about it? But no, we gotta leave it. That's why Bob, in his years of running the Henry Ford Center was so effective. But Rick and I like a good story. You gotta give us the context. So you went through quite a bit there, but and some things came out to me. I'm trying to understand and get a feel for how does this affect someone neurodivergent on a daily basis? And you went through some of that. not being able to block certain things coming out at you, some distrust. What else happens? Is it fatigue? Is it the sense of claustrophobia? What happens in that wide? In that, I know it's a wide range, but give us some of the daily things that people experience in that.
So, because there are structural differences, people are having a different experience in their lives. And for some of them, they don't relate to time in the same way other people do. So there can be time blindness. They might have trouble scheduling. I was working with an AI tool on my business, and we came up with a list of things for me to do. And the AI tool said, "Would you like me to create a plan for you?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." And while it was doing that, I thought to myself, this will take about 2 weeks. And the tool came back and said 4 months. And I thought, what I was going to do was set my hair on fire and just go at it. And the tool said, well, why don't you do 2 or 3 things every 2 weeks, and gave it to me in a much more measured way. And so if I tried to do it my way, first of all, I wouldn't have gotten it done in 2 weeks. So I would have felt like I failed. If I had gotten it done, I would have only done that. I wouldn't have cleaned my house. I wouldn't have exercised. I wouldn't have talked to any friends. So I'd feel like my life was unbalanced. So that ability to gauge how much real time in the world will I need to do this, not all of us have an accurate sense of that.
Yeah. So
That's exactly.
for someone listening today, Paula, that they say this sounds familiar, right? That I may fit in this box, but they're not sure. What would be some signals that they might pay attention to? Is it to determine whether it's nervous system related or if it's just lack of motivation or discipline?
So if you've tried some things with real genuine effort and they're just not working out for you, that's one tip. If a lot of mainstream advice doesn't work for you, like I try that and that, no. If you buy a new planner every year and get enthusiastic about it for the first week or 2 and then it doesn't work anymore. If a lot of mainstream recommendations and approaches aren't working for you, it might be that the mainstream approaches don't work for you. And you might.
How many this got came to mind? How many adults, if you have a feel, or how widespread is it that someone is neurodivergent and doesn't realize it as an adult?
Well, a lot, because when I was a kid, we weren't, I mean, boys were more likely to be diagnosed with autism or ADHD, but girls of my generation, no. That was very rare. And diagnostic criteria are changing. I didn't look up numbers before this of percentages of population, but I think, as I recall, it's 20% or higher of the population is some form of neurodivergent.
It surprised me. Yeah, I could see that.
I was teaching a class recently for high support neurodivergent adults, and I could see that the staff on the other side of the room were moving some chairs. They're metal chairs on a metal cart. And so when they fell down and made a crash, I wasn't too surprised because I had seen across the room what was happening. And I don't think I have an enlarged amygdala, so I didn't perceive it as my life being in danger. But the man next to me just about jumped out of his skin. And so I looked at him and look, some chairs fell down. No one is hurt. No one's in trouble. Let's take a breath together. But, something can just happen in the environment and you can get a wash of stress hormones. You're not available to connect with other people. You're suddenly in a panic. That's not everybody, but there are a lot of folks who are very sensitive to to sounds, to lights, to movement. And it's not a trivial thing to get washed with stress hormones every time something happens suddenly around you. That adds up and has health consequences.
Textures. A lot of people have texture issues.
And what's interesting is a lot of neurodivergent folks have reflexes that didn't properly get integrated when they were young. So they could be either sensory avoidant, like lots of things irritate me, or sensory seeking, that their brain is still trying to make sense of sensory input. And so they're craving more of it, or they're craving specific textures.
Okay. So that gives a little bit that you talk about your own awareness. And later on we'll get into things which were surprising to me, like joint stability and how that could happen with neurodivergence. But give me a little bit more on, what are the challenges or what do you might see in someone and how this neurodivergence changes that body awareness overall.
So one thing that a lot of neurodivergent adults, and it's a whole galaxy, right? It's not a spectrum like a number line that you have more or less. There are lots of different ways in which people can have strengths and challenges. One thing I think about I think my own brain is ADHD, and I think of it like a bicycle brain. It's sometimes easier for me to go fast and then take a break. And from the outside, that might look like inconsistent energy, but it's just easier for me to get in and focus and go fast or take information in quickly and then stop altogether. If I have to get it on a really slow drip, that's exhausting to try to pay attention for that long. I think about with my own brain, it's a little bit like those televisions we used to have when I was a kid. You had to walk across the room to turn the channel. You had to adjust the rabbit ear antennas. And so I have my own schedule arranged so that some days I'm teaching and other days I'm doing desk work because it costs me executive function tokens to change the channel of my attention. And so if I need to jump back and forth, well, I'll be tired just from focusing on that many different things. Whereas if I can do one and go with it, then I'm much, much better off. So I'm self-employed and I can design my work week that way, but some people can't, and they might get interrupted a lot during the day, or they might need to switch tasks a lot. And that can be tiring just to have to focus your attention on that many things on demand.
So Bob, so you take that. So if people are kind of failing at being able to focus on those multiple things, and also I'll start out earlier by talking about where they maybe standard approaches are causing people neurodivergent not to be able to achieve like they would like to. In your work, what happens to people when they constantly fail at something? What starts happening with them?
Well, as Paula said, people start thinking there's something wrong with themselves. So it's really important for people to understand what failure really means. I mean, the definition of failure only means that somebody did not produce the result they wanted to produce in the time frame that they said they would produce it. That's the key thing, the time frame. If somebody wants to make $1.3 million salary next year and they only make $1.1 million salary next year, they failed. And so, it doesn't mean anything about them that they're a failure, they're a bad person. I think that people need to be educated on what failure means. And so they're not making it mean something about themselves, like there's something wrong with them. That's the way I look at it anyway.
You speaking about yourself, Dr. Bob, you only did 1.1 million last year?
I got even less than that. It was like 0.73 or something like that. I don't know. It's an off year.
So
Sorry to jump in, that can have a huge impact on people being willing to try things, right? I teach through the local recreation department, and I had a woman tell me, a few weeks into class that on the first day, she walked around the parking lot 3 times looking for the courage to enter the room. And how many people don't even sign up for a class or don't even go to a gym or because they didn't find the courage to take that first step. So when you start thinking that you're the problem and anywhere you go, you'll be the problem, then you stop having the courage to open doors and go in.
And maybe you never had the courage in the first place, because that starts at a very young age and it gets reinforced from a very young age.
Can you share, Paula, another example with us of maybe a client that you worked with that may have come in thinking that they were undisciplined or lazy and didn't realize that it may be an overload of their nervous system, or they were just overwhelmed, sensory overload, and how just shifting one approach really made a change for them?
Yeah. So one of the structural things I mentioned was the part of the brain that processes internal signals, right? Where am I? How do I coordinate my movements? So Pam had bariatric surgery. She joined an 8-week walking class that I taught, and she'd lost a lot of weight, and her doctor wanted her to walk to keep the weight off. And she wanted to, but when she walked, everything hurt, her knees, her hips, her back. So she was afraid she was caught between 2 bad options: stop walking and lose all the weight and gain all the weight back again, or continue to walk and maybe end up with permanent joint pain. So she was really teary the first night of class when we did introductions. And I said, okay, look, give me 4 weeks. Don't go on bed rest, but don't do any extra exercise. Just come to class. And so we looked at things like how your knee lines up with your toes, how do you shift weight through your feet, rotation of the arms as you're swinging them when you walk. And she didn't give me 4 weeks. She danced into class on the 4th night and said, I walked for 2 hours yesterday and nothing hurt. So
Right.
That wasn't her trying harder. It wasn't her exercising more. It was let's help your brain have a more accurate map of where you are. Let's help you get some more harmonious patterns of how you move when you're walking. And all the trouble cleared up. So, I mean, the world opens for her now. She can go all kinds of places.
I love this topic. Yeah, you gonna say something, Dr. Bob?
No, go ahead. Oh, no, I was just going to say that's so important because, the average person takes between 30,000 and 50,000 repetitive movements every day. And most people are doing them improperly. So when you're teaching somebody how to walk properly, which is one of the most repetitive movements of all, that's really important for somebody. So congratulations on getting that done.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I love this topic, because exercise as medicine, implies that there's some kind of diagnosis or a custom fit. And I love that just one size doesn't fit all, right? That, forcing a generic routine on everybody isn't going to work. So, Paula, what is a movement therapy in your world? And what's the difference than just somebody getting a gym membership?
So I like to ask people what they want to do, because what they'd like to get as a result will shape a lot where they are now in their abilities and what they'd like to do. Well, then we need to fill in the gaps so that they can get there. Stretching is not necessarily going to help a lot of people, especially if they're already hypermobile. Strengthening
Well,
might be helpful.
you just used a big word there, Paula, hypermobile. So
Yeah.
what does hypermobile mean?
So all the cells in your body are held in place by connective tissue. You can think of it like a bubble wrap, a cling film around everything, and it bunches together to form tendons and ligaments. You've seen it if you ever cut up raw chicken and you've got that little film in the middle, right? And in hypermobile people, that connective tissue is extra stretchy. And so they're not getting the same support for their joints that non-hypermobile people do from their ligaments. They're not getting energy, a springiness from their tendons. So these folks also, when you do a brain scan with hypermobile people, they tend to have that area of the brain that processes internal signals is smaller and less active. So they tend to be a little bit less aware of where their body parts are. And it's even more important for them to have good alignment because it's so easy for them to dislocate a joint or to herniate a disc. So alignment and proper form is really important, and they often don't even have a very clear sense of where their own parts are in relation to each other. So if someone like that starts out right away with a strengthening routine, they can get themselves into some trouble pretty quickly. So it doesn't mean that they can't or shouldn't strengthen. It just means that there needs to be a foundation of awareness of alignment, that they need to not just work on the beach muscles, right? But they need a core that's going to support the extra load that they bring on.
So I took you on a 10 divergent path there. So I'm now bringing you back to more of that, which is what Breck's question was, now going back to the context of, we should preface a little bit. So why is movement so important? Have you decided the neurodivergent? And then how is your approach to movement therapy, if we can call it that? How does that differ from a regular exercise routine?
So movement is so important for a number of different reasons, but one, just for a sense of self and confidence. So if you've ever had the experience of going for a walk and you think there's going to be one more step and there's not, and you kind of get that jolt, right? You made a prediction there'd be another step and there wasn't. So folks who have this proprioceptive function not really highly tuned in themselves, they're making those prediction errors all the time. They reach out for a door handle and they think it's closer than it is, and they get air, or they think it's further away and they bump their hand. I have friends who are very aware of what's going on inside, but they're constantly bumping into furniture and walls. If you're making these little prediction errors on a regular basis, that sort of saps your confidence, right? About your ability to make decisions, to make predictions in other areas of your life, about your ability to just move around the world and do things. And so having a sense that you're at home in your own body, you're at home in the world, you can make predictions with some reliability, you can make decisions, you can go where you want to go under your own power. That's just huge for self-confidence, for a sense of being able to do things in the world, having real agency at that kind of cellular level, right? I'm here. And movement is a huge part of that. It's also big for cognition, for keeping your brain, right? When you look around the world, we could have a conversation about consciousness in stones and trees. But the beings who have brains like ours are animals who move. And so your brain is really about evaluating your environment and moving yourself around in it. It's not just for conversation, although connecting with others in social tribes is really important. Yeah, Dr. Bob.
I wanted to ask a question. I don't know if there's an answer to this question, but it makes me wonder. You talked about different parts of the brain having different sizes and different activities. So, has anybody ever studied when you can take somebody and provide them, treatment input or whatever to resolve whatever situation that they were presenting with and no longer have that issue? Does that change the activity of the areas you're speaking about, or the size of those areas? Do they compensate and normalize in some way? I
I
just
don't
wonder.
know if anyone has done that work yet. Some of the ideas I'm presenting here are the research of Jessica Eccles from the University of Brighton in the UK. And she has done work like doing brain scans of people who are hypermobile and comparing those with brain scans of people who are not hypermobile. And she's a doctor, she's a university researcher, and she's very much of the opinion that for addressing the anxiety that a lot of neurodivergent adults have, probably movement therapy is going to be more effective than talk therapy or medication, because the cause of a lot of the anxiety are these prediction errors. You think that you're on track to move around the world and get somewhere, and then you don't.
Yeah.
But I don't know if she has done movement interventions and then scanned the brain again afterwards. But if anyone has done that work, it would probably be her. I'd be interested to reach out to her and see if she has or has considered it.
So, Paula,
No.
you gave the example of the lady that came dancing in because she was able to walk
Yeah.
2 hours without pains. Staying pain free through a practical strategy. Give us an example. What would be one of the principles that you helped her with?
Well, so the highest principle for me and how I stay pain free is that I adjust my environment to support me, and I don't adjust me to accommodate the environment. And so I have a chair that's a good height for me, and I have my keyboard at a good height for me. I have a ball that I can take the air out of and put it in. And when I go places, I take this with me so I don't get distorted by the crummy back support, different seats around the world. So I look out for what can I do that supports the body that I have, instead of not being a bother or not drawing anyone's attention by doing something a little unusual.
Okay. So some of what you went through there, it could be standard, and you do work with people, not only in the neurodivergent, but some of that is ergonomics that can apply to anybody.
Everybody. Yeah.
So are what you're describing, is it more prevalent amongst the neurodivergent that you need to do that? Or
So
is there a lot of pain that happens with, we started up in the opening talking about sometimes is, when pain comes through. If there is more pain, why is that? And what happened?
if you did a Venn diagram of neurodivergence and hypermobility, is pretty close to a circle. Not entirely, but there's a really high. And that was one of the things that Dr. Eccles commented on those brain scans. She didn't scan people for neurodivergence, only for hypermobile versus non-hypermobile. But she said the hypermobile brain scans looked a lot like ADHD and autism scans that she's seen. There can be a difference in how the body is tiring. If your connective tissue is stretchier, your muscles have to work a lot harder, right? You're more at risk for injury, and it's just a lot more effort to move around, to sit up straight, to do a lot of stuff. For neurodivergent folks also, there's a lot of feeling like they don't quite fit in and they're expected to. And so there can be a lot of judgment, feeling like they don't quite belong, feeling like they need to pretend in order to guarantee their welcome, and that they could lose that if they drop the mask. So all that's tiring as well.
Right. So
It's
now,
not that all neurodivergent people have more pain, but an autistic woman friend of mine said that the leading cause of death in autistic women is heart disease because of the elevated stress hormones. And the second leading cause of death is suicide, because things are just so hard and they feel so unwelcome so many places. So there can be a loneliness, and things don't work for me, and things I try are really hard, or I can't quite fit in, right? I just can't quite make it work. And so it can It can hit at a lot of different levels.
So
I mean,
let's draw that line a little bit back more to your work this that regard, where you said, you've now talked about anxiety and if, the potential for suicide, so depression and other things. How does this movement work you do with people? How does it help with the mental function, the clarity, and the emotion and the
Some of that, did you have something you wanted to toss in here, Dr. Bob?
no, it's okay. I can wait. I
Okay,
can wait.
we'll come back to you.
I'm interested in hearing what's going on right now.
So some of it is what I do in group classes with helping people feel welcome. So if you think about the stress response, flight, fight, freeze, fawn, the opposite of those is really engagement. I'm safe here. I belong here. I can participate. I can be seen and heard. And so I do a lot to create a warm, welcoming place. One of my students, I didn't know this. She took class with me for several years, but when she first came, she'd fallen into a depression. And she wasn't leaving the house. She'd retired from her job and she wasn't leaving the house. And her husband tried a bunch of things to get her out. And he said, "What about taking a yoga class?" And she said, "Yeah, I think I could do that." I didn't even know when she first came, she wasn't leaving the house. But I gave instructions that were easy for her to follow. So she didn't feel lost and she couldn't keep up. And that helped her feel more comfortable and more at ease. And the room was welcoming. And so she starts showing up early for class to talk to other people. And she starts asking questions in class. And then she starts thinking she'd like to come twice a week instead of once a week. And her husband says, "Well, I'm taking a painting class on that day. I have to drive herself." So now she's driving herself. So the movement was part of it. The emphatically welcoming environment was part of it. Having other people be glad to see her and ask how she's doing is part of it, right? The movement is an important piece, and wrapping that in a social experience is also important.
How do you find out about these people? Like, how do they present? I mean, how do you discover them, presents, and do they just come in
Well,
and go, yeah, I'm a neurodivergent person, or what do they do?
for a long time, I was really focusing on helping older women in general with a lot of the troubles that can happen with age. And then the pandemic happened, and I started teaching online, and my in-person practice closed. And then I started teaching in person again. And there's a local organization called Community Support Services that works with a lot of high support neurodivergent adults. They don't drive themselves, they don't live alone. There are a lot of support staff. And so now I'm teaching 7 classes a week for them. So I see about 50 of those adults. They range in age from 24 to 66. And so so they're having the same issues we all are, right? They're living in an aging body. How do you manage that? Some of them are nonverbal, some of them are limited communication. So with those folks, I really know they're neurodivergent. Other folks, birds of a feather flock together. And if people have found me interesting and been in my world for a little while, I would suspect that there might be a reason for that. And sometimes I can make guesses or they'll tell me, but a lot it's just creating a warm environment and giving people a next step that's going to be a win for them in whatever area they are. I'm ADHD. A friend of mine is ADHD, and when she's an MC, she notices those people didn't get their binders yet. This table needs their water pitchers refilled, right? Like she's out there. And that's me too. So that part, I don't know how much I could explain to you how I do it. It's just that's part of the gift that I bring along with this other study and information.
Yeah. Well, let's take a quick moment right now to share something that many of our listeners find helpful. And if you are looking for practical ways to support your health beyond today's conversation, take a look at some of the solutions we personally use and recommend as hosts. Today, we want to talk about some tools that support things like, metabolic health, reducing pain, improving, recovery, and help with overall wellness. Today, we're going to talk about the BrainIQ Pain Eraser. This is a roll-on that addresses pain and used by our very own Tim Daniels after years of knee damage. As a D1 athlete and an avid exerciser, he gets relief with BrainIQ Pain Eraser. It delivers instant targeted relief using advanced nanotechnology combined with powerful natural ingredients that absorb quickly right where you need them. No pills, no mess, just roll it on and get back to moving. It's ideal for the lower back pain, your knee pain, shoulder pain, joint discomfort, or everyday aches and pains. Makes it great for active adults and busy professionals and anyone just tired of pain slowing them down. It's compact, easy to use, and effective. It's BrainIQ Pain Eraser. Works where and when you need it. Try it today yourself, and we'll leave a link in the show notes so that you can see where to get this amazing roll-on. So for many neurodivergent adults, the issue isn't, the effort, right? It's that their body doesn't feel predictable or stable or safe. And we've
Some,
that, yeah. So
yeah.
explain why someone that may be, we talked about a hypermobility, and someone that might be having pain or fatigue or even injury after injury after injury. They seem flexible and fine, but explain that more for our listeners, Paula.
So I had a yoga student years ago who's a young woman in her 30s, and she was hypermobile. She was super flexible, but she couldn't hold any yoga pose for very long, right? Because she didn't have the strength to hold it. She would just fall right out of it. And she could easily she would sort of exploit some joints more than others. I gave an adjustment to, we have a standing side bend pose called half moon that I would give them a 1 minute hold for. And so she could go really deep for, like 15, 20 seconds. So I gave her an alignment adjustment. She didn't go nearly as deep and she was able to hold it for the entire minute, right? So you can get into these little identity pieces of thinking, well, I'm flexible and I can't do things that require strength, but a little adjustment to alignment, and you might find that you've got more strength than you thought you did.
Okay. Then again, we're touching on this again because just as you mentioned, there's a big overlap between the neurodivergence and them being hypermobile. An aside before I ask you a question here, there are connective tissue diseases, I guess that could be described as hypermobile, like Ehlers-Danlos. Have you ever done any work with them, or have you done any reach out to those?
Yes.
Those people?
Yeah. So a friend of mine has Ehlers-Danlos, an autistic man, and he said, this is related to the rest of the conversation here. He sent me a message saying, I have several herniated discs due to the Ehlers-Danlos, and I need to decompress them. Can you recommend any gentle stretches? It's like, don't stretch. So we got on a video call and I talked to him about using a back support up behind his ribs to take his spine out of a slump. And the next day on social media, he said, I have a lot of back pain, and usually by this time of day, I'm in bed. But I've been able to sit up a lot longer today. My back is sore, but it's not in pain. I feel like I have a new back. This one tip that Paula shared with me is just taking the pressure off my back in a huge way. So outsourcing some of the work to the furniture so that your spine is in a neutral upright position instead of collapsed in various ways can make a huge difference in, getting oxygen to your brain. Another thing, if your tail is tucked under, if your spine is rounded, your tongue won't properly reach the roof of your mouth. You're going to be more likely to choke on thin liquids, water, soda, tea, soup. And so getting yourself into a nice upright, a little bit of incurve in the low back is going to make meal times less exciting. And that's true for neurodivergent folks. It's true for all kinds of people, right? Anybody that has gotten really slumpy and older might find that they're choking a little more frequently than they used to.
Now, you mentioned him when he reached out to you, and said, "Oh, you're stretching." You said, "No, don't stretch." And then you think earlier on you talked to the hypermobility and not starting out with stretching. So, what are the common in that hypermobility environment? Are there other kind of standard mistakes you think people are making when they initially try to address it?
I think some folks enjoy or are celebrated for the flexibility, and so they kind of lean into that, but it doesn't help them with more stability, and it doesn't necessarily help with a more harmonious teamwork among the muscles. So I think folks, they don't necessarily know, they don't necessarily have a clear idea of what is it that they'd like to do. They just hear, oh, I should go to the gym. And so they might try it. And then they don't necessarily have a way of mapping out, well, what are the steps that would get me to where I'd like to be? And so I had one student say that before he worked with me, he says, there's a lot of information online. I don't know how to sift through it. I don't know what's helpful, what's not. I don't know what's helpful to me and what's not. And so taking class with me for a few years, he's like, oh, now I have a better framework for understanding. And so now when I run across information online, I'm better able to say yes or no, but also I don't have to go looking for it so much because I have a good set of things that work for me now.
Right. So they don't go into it with an informed plan and an informed set of objectives.
Right, which makes sense because if you haven't studied this, how would you know, right? You're really good at other things that I don't know anything about. Why would we when I was in school, our physical education was, running around, like get us tired so we could go sit still again in the afternoon. But we didn't really learn about
Movement.
alignment or coordinated movement or how to care for ourselves. It just, well, get up and run around. So we did.
I think what you're doing is still in the infancy because there are not that many people. Everybody needs some aspect of what you're talking about. Everybody. And so there's not enough of you around really to deliver this for people because people need to get it from somewhere.
And you already shared the example of how you helped, one individual with the support, and I that was what I was going to have you do next. And so I'll just share my own experience. Every time I get on a Zoom with Dr. Bob, I try to get a little more straight because he's all about posture.
I did just the opposite to upset him.
Tim likes to get me pissed off. Yeah.
The other
Well,
thing too. Oh, go ahead,
I'd
Paula.
like to share one tip related to that, right? So if you just let your arms hang down to your sides right now and you rotate so the palms of your hands face the wall behind you, and then rotate so the palms of the hands face the wall in front of you. If you don't resist and just give in to temptation, when the palms face the wall behind you, I think you'll find that your shoulders tend to come forward and maybe even your head comes forward and your spine rounds a little bit. And if you rotate so the palms face forward without effort, right? Without muscular effort, the shoulders move back, the head moves back, the spine is more upright. And so that's a really quick, anytime you are going to drive your car, hold the steering wheel here instead of starting from a hunch. If you're going for a walk, get your, you don't have to have the palms all the way forward. Palms facing you will be enough. But if the palms of the hands face the wall behind you, you're going to be more likely to shuffle, right? It'll be harder for you to pick up your feet.
Yeah, that is such a great tip. And I'm always catching myself walking and and I have to recorrect and roll my shoulders back. But I can tell you there's a reason why I haven't done that from an early age is because I always thought that was a more proudful, sticking your chest out and being kind of macho or whatever. And I was kind of against that. But I realized, from seeing people's postures, the more that they're leaned over and being more humble, if you will, those are the ones that are going to end up with walkers at age, 70, 80.
True. And you got to have proper posture to stay off a walker. One of the simple things I teach people about walking, I teach everybody how to walk properly because it's so important. It's such a big input. Looking up and looking long into the distance is really important instead of looking down, which leads to the forward head and the dowager hump and all these other problems. And then also, it's like driving a car. If you look over the front end of your car and try and stay in the lane, it doesn't really work. It's really impossible. But when you look out in the distance in the car, your car is just going to go where you're looking and it's going to get there fine. So it's the same with walking. Look down at the ground, you have a much higher chance of falling and tripping than you do if you're scanning and then looking up and using your peripheral vision to pick up on things. So very important, proper walking.
Yes.
I do look down an awful lot when I walk because I'm usually on some mountain somewhere and I want to make sure my footing is going properly. Also, we tend to have a few of those little slithery things in this part of the world. I think we've got the most species of rattlesnakes of anywhere in the world here in Arizona. So I do keep an eye on the ground. But so where's the proper balance for keeping my shoulders back and my looking forward, but also making sure I'm not stepping on a snake?
Well, one thing I like about this arm rotation is if your palms face behind you, you won't swing very well. You'll have kind of a shuffle. If you just simply get the palms of your hands facing your own legs, your arms will swing better. You will naturally, just as a cascade, you'll be a little more upright. And so you'll already be set up for that. If the palms face behind you and you've already started the collapse, it's easier to go deeper.
Yeah,
But
I
if
love
you've
that.
got yourself just a little more upright as a functional base, then you can look down, you can look around, you've got options.
Love that
Yeah.
tip. That's great. Thanks, Paula.
So
You're
now
welcome.
with that, so I make these changes, and you and Dr. Bob are always talking about these. Well, I can't say you always because I don't know you well. I tell you all, I'm not around each other. So you always, Dr. Bob's always talking about these things. But now with your work with the elderly and others and working on this, have you seen meaningful change in all those things you talked about earlier? The ability to socialize, the ability to parent, the confidence, the ability to work. What have you seen change with the people as you've worked with them in the movement?
One thing I know from my own life is that I had chronic pain for 10 years. And wow, that saps your patience, saps your sense of humor, right? Like your ability to show up and not find other people annoying is greatly diminished. And so if you're parenting, if you're working, and you hurt all the time, if you're tired from even a little bit, your enthusiasm for being active, your enthusiasm for interacting with others, all that will be diminished. I had one woman come for a while, a couple of years. She had multiple sclerosis. She had pain walking just across the street up a flight of stairs. And then she disappeared for a long time. And she came back and I said, "Where have you been?" And she said, "I went on a 6-month around the world tour. I got off the bus at every stop." She'd gone to like temple complexes in Cambodia, right? Like she went from I can't walk across the street to I was slow, but I got off the bus everywhere. I went around the world. So it really opens up a sense of agency that I can make choices in my life. I can show up for other people. I can show up for myself. One of my students was frustrated because she thought she should have more beautiful poses, but she went to the park with her 5 grandchildren and she realized, right, this is why I take yoga. I want to be able to come to the park with 5 grandchildren and enjoy the time with them. So there's a lot of folks that are just, this helps me be available in my life in ways that I want to.
Dr. Bob, I've got a question for you, as a resident brain researcher here. And when somebody's able to make that shift, right, that my body is not betraying me anymore and now I can actually work with my body, what is the change psychologically for them?
I think it has to do with what Paula was talking about earlier, which is being confident. When you start making some of the changes, people don't know what changes to make, how to make the changes, because they're stuck in different patterns. And so when somebody like Paula comes in, it's okay, you can try this, you can do that. They start to make changes, they make progress, and right away they start feeling like, oh, this is really good. This is working for me. And then that allows them the space to be more confident in their life, about being able to accomplish things. And so I think that's probably the biggest thing that we can provide our clients is that space to be confident and accomplish things that they weren't able to accomplish before because they didn't know how. They needed the guidance.
Thank you for that.
So with that, Dr. Bob seconded. So you've gotten Paula, so people to have safety up, confidence up, energy up, pain down as you talked about, some more mental clarity and functioning better. So what prepared you for this? What did you go undertake and what skills did you develop to be able to be competent at this, Paula?
So I did not set out to do this. I had my own puzzle to solve, which was 10 years of back pain. And I made the rounds of lots of people hoping someone else would fix me, and it didn't work. And I developed a regular yoga practice, and that took me out of the just pain at rest. And so I went off to yoga teacher training because I really wanted this is a possible experience in the world, and I'd like to be able to help other people. So I went off to yoga teacher training, and I was out of chronic pain, but I still couldn't walk very far. I couldn't use a computer mouse very long before I got irritated and was in pain of my left knee, my right shoulder. So I went to Feldenkrais training and
You went to
looked
what
at
training?
how do I help people.
Feldenkrais, which is a really phenomenal training, actually.
Yeah, Feldenkrais, Feldenkrais, really looking at brain-body connections. How do you improve the map in the brain of what's available inside? How do you develop new possibilities, not just be stuck in the rut of your old habits? And I saw a woman fall down, and it was the second time she had fallen in a week. And I thought, wow, that would really change quality of life if I didn't feel like I could even walk around my neighborhood. So I continued teaching at the yoga studio, but I started teaching at the rec department, which was an easier lift for people to join classes and get in. And then that was all 2001 is when I went to yoga training. Then 5, I finished Feldenkrais training. So I've had 21 years since then. I've just been attending a lot of different trainings for incontinence is one issue my people have. What movement approach will solve that? What do I do for people with arthritis? What about multiple sclerosis? What about balance? I've had the good fortune to be able to train with a lot of wonderful teachers. And because I was teaching for a lot of years, I was seeing 100 people a week in 12 classes through the recreation department, which is a marvelous laboratory, right? To work with them, to see what they still had trouble with, to go to a training, to get myself in front of somebody who knew more than me and say, all right, but what about this? I did that. And then this person still has trouble. So now what do I do next? And then go back to them and say, all right, try this. So it's just been an incredible opportunity to have it not be hypothetical or not just me, right? And a lot of those folks, I had a 60-70% return rate of students. So some people felt great and some people didn't, and they were still coming every week. And so they were showing up and they were trying to follow the directions. So it must be the directions were bad, right? I needed to be a better teacher if they were going to improve by coming to my classes. And so I did what I could to learn what I needed to and to see more and be more useful.
70%, 70% is not bad. 2% is pretty good for retention in general. A lot of people don't even get near that. So
And for years, right? Like I have some students, they've taken classes with me for 10, 15 years. So it's been fabulous. Then we have a lot of shared archives, right? Well, but a few years ago, you were doing this with the toes. How does that relate to what you're doing now, right? So we have that. But also, it was, if I just went into a new place every time and people said, oh, this is great, then I'd think, great. And having that happen and also having people say, and this is still a problem for me, and be like, all right, so what am I going to do then to help resolve this problem?
Okay. So now, are you still helping people remotely as well?
Yes. So I have some online workshops, and I don't have the regular online classes anymore. Those got small, and so I shifted to another thing. But I have some digital packages. People can work at their own pace online, and I have some live workshops where we can meet. And I'm looking at opening up some office hours so people can drop in and say, "Well, what about this?"
And how do people find your digital packages?
So flourishwithpaula.com/WellWaveNow is a landing page where they can find me. And I have a resource hub with like the sitting guide about how to sit comfortably is in there, and some journal prompts and how to drive comfortably, how to stay comfortable in your car for long drives.
that's
So that will
important.
get them.
Really important.
That's so important. So that will get them into my world, and then they'll see and hear announcements about things that are coming up.
So but if someone says, "But Paula, you're not as handsome as Dr. Bob, and I really want somebody as handsome as Dr. Bob to work with,"
She's way better looking than me, Timmy. Come on, man. Go ahead.
nobody's as good looking as you, Dr. Bob.
Come on, please.
And we definitely want them to go to you. What would you tell them to look for in somebody, so that they're not just being taken advantage of and have a real shot at making some progress?
I'd love them to not fall for, sky in the pie promises or pie in the sky promises about, well, you do this one thing and then, your hair won't frizz and you can always find parking places, right? Like that's not going to happen.
That's
Looking
great.
for someone who understands that it's going to be a process. And like you getting acquainted with yourself and finding your way into a routine is going to be part of that process. Certifications are wonderful and credentials and everything, but you also, there's so much on social media these days. Take a look at someone's profile. Are they just showing off how good they look, or are they talking about how to create safety, how to create more awareness? Are they talking about some of the small victories that their clients have had?
And also, Paula, I think that I didn't realize how well trained you are when you've got this Feldenkrais training, which is some of the best movement re-education training in the world. And it takes a lot to master his stuff because it's complex, And then you've got the yoga and you got several other things. So I think looking at people who are highly trained in movement education is a big deal too.
I think also, I don't mean to say that you have to have had trouble to be a good teacher, but some folks get into being a coach or a trainer because they're naturally athletic, and that's great. But if you've got trouble, if they haven't had an experience or they haven't had more training in that, they might want to push you because that's what works for them. And if that's not going to work for you, make sure that you've got somebody who understands that their experience is not the only one in the world and has some ability to help people bridge from being limited to having more agency.
Very good.
So
So
for
now
our
let's
listeners,
say, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say for our listeners today, I just want to make it as practical as possible. Maybe they may not have access to a specialist like you, Paula, right away, but we want to make sure that they follow a principle so that they're not making things worse. What would be that one principle that you would want to share with our audience?
So
Yeah,
one,
they've gotten so excited by you today, and they got the ADHD. They say, "I can't wait.
they're going.
I gotta do something right now." Paula, what do you?
So it's going to be a process. And if you've got any kind of inflammatory condition, one thing that was so helpful for me to learn is, well, then don't go at it with your 110% overachiever approach, right? Like if you've got fibromyalgia, arthritis, any kind of inflammatory condition, think about 20% of your capacity the first time, because you might not get an inflammatory response for 2 days. So you truly don't know in the movement whether you've moment. Start slow, start small, and pay attention to your breathing. If you're holding your breath, if you're bracing your muscles for whatever the activity is, that's a stress response. So can you do it while you're breathing? Can you do it with your muscles more relaxed? If not, that you might want to back off and try something else. But to put the emphasis on quality of movement, not how many reps, not how many weights, not how far you go, how long you go, but do you have a sense of ease and harmony in your movements?
Yeah, very good. They're going to ask you this, but I have to ask you, like, I want to get in touch with you because I'm interested in how you teach. So,
Yeah,
because I
beautiful.
learned some things from you. So how would I get a hold of you if I'm a
So
client of yours?
yeah, so flourishwithpaula.com/WellWaveNow will give all of you folks a chance to get in. You'll get an email from me and you can reply to that email.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
Add that to the show notes. But
Yeah.
any
Beautiful.
other questions before we wrap up? Well, thank you, Paula, so much for being our guest today. It was great to have you on the WellWaveNOW show. Thank you for being here.
This was a great pleasure. I'm delighted to have spent time with the three of you.
Movement as medicine is not just about pushing harder. It's about making your body more cooperative, your nervous system more regulated, and your daily life more functional. So today, Paula has helped us define neurodivergent. She understands, the pain and injury cycle and how, we need to do things a little different sometimes. It's not just one exercise fits all. And right now, the movement approach that she has shared with us are some amazing tips. I'm looking forward to trying the palms to the side or the palms forward on my next walk. So thank you for that tip. Now, if this episode has been useful to you, please subscribe to the Wellness Wave Club YouTube channel and visit wellnesswaveclub.com and continue the conversation with us on our Facebook group. And we look forward to having you join us there. So until next time, everyone, stay curious, stay empowered, and remember, wellness, it's in you. All right. Thanks, everybody that joined us live today.